Welcome in to another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube. Today, I've got my 5 takeaway series every Monday from now until the NFL season, covering that week's slate. As always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's go. The first one, Ladd McConkey, a big breakout this week. Now, I've been talking about him for a while. He'd been kind of bubbling under the radar, good advanced stats, but had not broken out for fantasy. But that happened this week, despite his hip injury. 6 catches, 111 yards, 2 touchdowns on 6 targets. Still played mostly in the slot, but ran 30 routes, just one less than outside wide receiver Simi Fehoko. Yes, that was really an outside wide receiver this week. And Josh Palmer. McConkey leads the Chargers with 45 targets and a 23.9% target share. It's impressive for a rookie wide receiver. There's no doubt that McConkey is the wide receiver 1 on the Chargers right now. Quentin Johnston has faded away. Joshua Palmer hasn't been that good. So McConkey is clearly their wide receiver 1 right now. Now, what do you do? It's probably hard to buy McConkey. So I would buy Justin Herbert in Superflex leagues. Herbert had a very strong game this week. 20 of 32 for 279 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 4 carries for 49 yards. Still feel like he's not super highly valued. He has a great young weapon in McConkey. That's good. Imagine when the Chargers actually add a functional outside wide receiver to this offense. They could do it next year. Herbert will be a lot better. Now, you could buy Herbert for, there were a lot of versions of this, a 25 first plus a small piece. There was one with Derek Carr. There was another with a 25 second. It's the type of deal I'd do to get to Herbert in a super flex league. And then there was also this one. You get Herbert and a 26 first for CeeDee Lamb. I like Lamb a lot. But to get a first with a higher end quarterback for any non-quarterback in Superflex is a good deal. I'd definitely rather rebuild around a quarterback in Superflex than a wide receiver if I had to pick. So this is the kind of deal I might look to make, maybe if I'm not contending, to move to Justin Herbert from CeeDee Lamb and get a first as well. Number 2, Devon Achane is a stud with Tua Tagovailoa back. Achane back to his efficient self. Really, really good. 10 carries for 97 yards and 6 catches, 50 yards and a touchdown. Still only played a 58% snap share. That's the exact same as last week, but he was effective again. Again, we cannot expect Achane to play a 80% snap share. That's not going to happen. But it's important to note that his day could have been even bigger if Raheem Mostert, who had 9 carries for 19 yards, didn't have 2 rushing touchdowns. So Achane has even more room to grow for fantasy. He has 6 catches, 7 targets, and 50 receiving yards in every game Tua Tagovailoa has played. So there was a lot of focused on Tagovailoa as related to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. But Achane was extremely effective too. He didn't have more than 3 catches or 30 receiving yards in any game without Tua. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle were okay in this game, but didn't have the same boost as Achane. Hill had 6 catches for 72 yards and 9 targets. It's fine, but it wasn't a Hill game. His only massive game came in week 1, where he had 7 catches, 130 yards, and touchdown. Waddle, 4 catches, 45 yards on 6 targets. Slightly concerning. He hasn't had 5 catches or 50 yards since week 1, 0 receiving touchdowns, and just 2 more targets than Achane on the season. So that is very concerning. Now, I would, again, the actionable moves to buy into Tua. So it's clearly that he's what makes the offense go, right? The problem with buying any one of the weapons is that Hill is older, Achane probably too expensive, and Waddle I'm a little concerned about. I mean, Achane is, the fact that he has 2 fewer targets than Waddle is not great for Waddle's production. But Tua himself is still undervalued. I saw a trade in Superflex. You could buy Tua for Tank Bigsby and a 26 second. Okay, Tank Bigsby is whatever. I would easily take Tua here. Another one. By Tua from Michael Penix. Michael Penix might play who knows when. I mean, we have no idea. He's not even that good of a prospect, in my opinion. So I don't understand this one. I would much rather have Tua. And these were 2 of the better trades. There were so many horrific trades where Tua was being acquired for nothing. He's being treated as not worth much, which is a mistake. Brandon Cooks and other players have had a bunch of concussions. People said, oh, they should retire. And then after a while, their careers continued without further incident. So, yeah, I would love to buy into Tua Tagovailoa at a low price, and I'd be happy to do that right now. Next up, Chris Olave will be a wide receiver 1 down the stretch. Olave had a huge game, despite the Saints having to bench Spencer Rattler for the 2nd straight week for Jay Kaner. Olave had 8 catches, 107 yards on 14 targets. He led the Saints in targets, 36.8 target share in this game. And that can be expected moving forward. Maybe not 36% because that's not going to happen, but 30% target share could be expected, possibly with Rashid Shaheed out. There's no one else. And Olave is having a very solid season if you don't count the concussion game against him, where he played like 5% of snaps. In the other 6 games, 30 catches, 382 yards, touchdown, 42 targets, 5 catches in 63.7 yards a game. Look, I mean, it's a slight step down from his previous numbers. It's not that far off, despite the quarterback problems. The route and open charts show that Olave remains an elite to borderline elite wide receiver. He's doing better this year in catch rate and yards per target, despite the uneven quarterback play. And there's one other thing with Chris Olave. He has 10 career receiving touchdowns on 190 catches and 300 targets. I mean, that means that Olave is a target for touchdown regression. I don't think that Olave just cannot score touchdowns. He's been unlucky. And we saw with a player like Chris Godwin before he got hurt this year, you don't score touchdowns until some year you do score touchdowns. It's very random, but I get that the lack of touchdowns is frustrating fantasy managers, dynasty managers with Olave because you're not getting those big blow-up games without the touchdowns. Now, of course, just buy Olave. I mean, he's still not being treated with the respect he deserves. He's going to get a high money wide receiver extension. These kind of wide receivers just do. They all get them. You could buy Olave for Keon Coleman and Travis Etienne. I mean, these are maybe pieces. Maybe. I don't want maybe. And then this other one, Jameson Williams in 26nd. Again, maybe. A lot of maybe here. Chris Olave is already really good and still just turns 25 next summer. Olave is not an old player. So I'm still very in on Chris Olave, and I do think he will deliver as a wide receiver 1 down the stretch without Rashid Shaheed and with Derek Carr back. If you like my YouTube content, you should sign up for the Patreon. You get my rankings, access to the Discord, and the ability to ask in advance questions for these YouTube videos. Tiers begin at just $6 a month and include all of that. If you want to know more about the Patreon, check out both of my Why You Should Join the Patreon videos on the channel. I really appreciate everyone who signed up and any new patrons who join. Now, the one thing I think that's different about the advice that I offer on the Patreon is that I won't necessarily tell you what you want to hear or what's going to make you happy. That's not really what we do here. I just, call it like I see it, give you advice. I'm not the make you feel better analyst. I'm the try to help your team win analyst. Stop you from making bad moves, especially from trading away all of your future picks in Dynasty. So those are the kind of things that I'm delivering on the Patreon. Honest feedback, honest advice. None of the canned garbage that you see on Twitter, on other YouTube channels these days. Now, with that said, let's move into our next takeaway. So we got to talk about Jameis Winston, who revived the Browns offense this week. He suddenly made them relevant in a win over the Ravens. Who would have expected that? Of course, Kevin Stefanski named him the starting quarterback moving forward. He should have been the starting quarterback all along. And most of all, it was nice to find the Browns fun again. Winston was 27-41 for 334 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was great. Cedric Tillman, 7 catches, 99 yards, 2 touchdowns on 9 targets. Tillman almost caught up to Jerry Jeudy in routes run and snaps. Feels like it's kind of a co-wide receiver 1 situation, except Tillman has been more productive over the last couple of weeks. Elijah Moore, 8 catches, 85 yards on 12 targets. He's the slot wide receiver, even though he led in targets. Jerry Jeudy, 5 catches, 79 yards on 8 targets. It just feels like not doing as much as Tillman. I'd rather take a shot on Tillman next week if I'm playing 1. David Njoku, 5 catches, 61 yards, touchdown on 7 targets. With the state of the tight end position, he's a must-start tight end every week now. He ran more routes than Elijah Moore. I think Njoku is really the second receiving weapon in this offense right now. Maybe Tillman is the one. We're going to have to see. Now, what do we do? Everyone was so great in this game. I would move on from Jerry Jeudy. For me, the Ravens are the biggest pass funnel defense in the NFL. You cannot run on the Ravens and you can throw all over them. This is not going to be normal. All 3 wide receivers and tight end are not all going to produce in any given week. If I'm looking at one of them, it's Cedric Tillman at wide receiver, and then David Njoku will be involved. But Jerry Jeudy, I could take or leave, and I'd rather leave. He was 3rd in targets among the wide receiver. We've seen enough of Jerry Jeudy. I know what Jerry Jeudy is in year 5 of his career. Nothing is going to change. I'd rather take Tillman at a cheaper cost. A couple of deals. You could sell Jeudy for a 25-second. I'd just like to move on. Move on while he has this target vacuum. They're obviously going to bring in someone else next year to add to this receiver room. No interest in Jeudy. And then this one, I love this one. Jeudy and Jalen McMillan for 27 first. The type of move I do often. I love getting a first, even far away for this level of players. These players who are, they're fine, but they're not going to be worth a first or anywhere near it ever. So I would love to do a move like this, especially if I were in a rebuild. Last takeaway, and this really has nothing to do with this week's games, but I wanted to discuss this. Trey Benson feels like a bust. This week, 1 carry for 10 yards, no targets. Played fewer snaps than Amari DiMercato again. It's getting very, very concerning how little we've seen of Benson. Where is he? 31 carries, 117 yards, and 2 catches for 12 yards this year. Most of this playing time came in garbage time. He saw 20 of these 31 carries in blowout games in weeks 2 and 4. Since then, he's only had 6 carries over the past 4 games because those have been more competitive. Some running backs do start slow, but there's a difference between not overtaking James Conner, which I understand, and not getting involved at all. And, it's dangerous. Benson was only a 3rd-round pick. It's not a guarantee of success. Some 3rd-round picks of recent at running back. I mean, Tyrion Davis-Price, no. Trey Sermon, Keyshawn Vaughn, Darrington Evans. These are some 3rd-round picks who just never really did anything on their original team. I mean, some of them had some roles later, but never did anything on the original team. There's been plenty of others, Kendra Miller, Tajay Spears so far, who haven't, Royce Freeman, who haven't been particularly successful. Basically, a 3rd-round running back, 1/3 of them work out good or great. I mean, you do have Alvin Kamara in there. I mean, Rashad White has been pretty successful. And then, a 3rd of them are your backup okay players. Royce Freeman, I think, would be okay. Damian Harris, okay. That type of player. And then there's 1/3 of them who are total busts. And most of the ones who ended up being good or decent got a little bit more involved early in their career than Benson, essentially, who has not been involved at all. So I am very concerned about Trey Benson. Now, unfortunately, there's nothing you can do if you have Trey Benson. You just hold on to him and hang on, hope for the best. But what you can do is sell James Conner. Now, I love Conner. He's playing really well, but 29 years old, massive injury history, no contract for 2025. If Benson cannot hack it as the backup, the Cardinals could absolutely bring in another running back in addition to retaining Conner for 2025. They could let Conner walk and find their new starter in the 2025 NFL draft. Just because Benson's playing badly doesn't mean that Conner is going to play well into his 30s. That's not common. So you could sell James Conner for 25 second. There were zillion versions of this, some even with small pieces added to the 25 second. If you're a contender, you don't have to do this, but if you're turning the page on this season, it's the time to move Conner. And then in Superflex, I saw this. I thought was interesting. Sell Conner and Chase Brown for Sam Darnold on Superflex. I think Darnold is the only thing here that's going to be valuable in Superflex next year. So I love this one. Now, I'm going to move into NFL news. I have 3 stories to cover, and we'll run through them real quick. Stefon Diggs, knee injury. We don't have confirmation here, but it feels like it might be a torn ACL. A lot of people are saying that. Either way, Diggs is going to miss significant time. Free agent at the end of the year. Probably 31 years old. Probably the end of Diggs' relevance in Dynasty. Nico Collins is returning in week 10. He's going to be a league winner. If there's any buy window on Collins left, I'd take it. Tank Dell replaced, Diggs, I guess, in the wide receiver 1 role. 4 catches, 35 yards, and a touchdown. Touchdown's nice, but only 4 targets. He has not stepped up consistently, no matter how many injuries there are. When Collins got injured, we wanted Dell to step up. He didn't do it. When Diggs got injured in this game, we wanted Dell to step up. He didn't do it. I'm concerned this just kind of is what he is. I don't know what happened, but it's not the same player we've seen as a rookie. So I don't know. I might consider moving on from Dell in this sell window if there is one for a massive value, if you can do that. Story number 2. Christian Kirk suffered a season-ending collarbone injury. It sucks. He's out for the year. And this is almost certainly his last game in Jacksonville. We know he was a popular trade candidate this year so far. 27 catches, 379 yards, touchdown, 47 targets. I mean, he's been okay, but really just hasn't been efficient, has not delivered consistently. The Jaguars can save about $13.6 million by cutting Kirk in 2025. I don't know why they wouldn't do that. I mean, he has not produced this year. They have Brian Thomas Jr., they have Evan Ingram and Gabe Davis under free agent contracts or extensions that they signed. Maybe they can get a late pick by trading Kirk. They already have an extra 3rd and 4th round pick in the draft. They can easily draft a far cheaper slot wide receiver to round out their offense, at least next year, around Thomas, Davis, and Ingram, and that then new player. I don't see why they would have any reason to keep Kirk. So Unfortunately, Kirk, we're probably done with in Dynasty. 28 years old, serious injury, didn't do anything this year. I don't think Christian Kirk is ever going to have Dynasty value again. Brian Thomas also suffered a ribs chest injury. MRI was clean, though, so I'm hoping we dodged a bullet here. And Thomas, with no Kirk, is going to be a low-end fantasy wide receiver 1 upon his return. He's been really, really good this year. And we might have a budding superstar in Dynasty in Brian Thomas. Now, last one. Jordan Mason, shoulder injury, Christian McCaffrey returning. So Mason left with a re-injury to the same shoulder as his previous AC joint sprain. CMC seems likely to return in week 10 after the 49ers week 9 bye. At that point, I'm not sure CMC isn't healthier than Mason. I don't think Mason's going to retain any role that we care about in the games where CMC is playing. Isaac Guerrero replaced Mason. 14 carries, 85 yards, a touchdown, 3 catches, 17 yards. It's very concerning for Mason's value that Guerrero looked just as good as Mason in the same role. Every running back who's ever been given this role, except Tevin Coleman, has done well in this 49ers starter role. Every single one. So Guerrero is in the circle of trust. That's good. He's a good long-term stash in Dynasty. Probably won't matter in the short term because both Mason and CMC are going to play in week 10. Now, I've got a couple of Patreon questions. We're going to jump into those real quick and then close out the video. What do you think of guys like Coker and Tillman, players that I've recommended stashing, sleepers, stuff like that? Young waiver guys who have breakout games. In general, should you try to flip them or should you hold? Depends on what you're selling for. If you're selling for a fourth, I don't find that to be really productive. If you're getting a third, I'm often taking it, depends on the player, to just go through these two players. For Coker, yes, I would take a third. I don't believe in Jalen Coker at all. I mean, this is an undrafted player. If you can get a third for someone who's literally was a nobody, I would take it. For Tillman is good. I mean, Tillman was a really good prospect. So I'm not sure I would just take a single 25 third for Tillman. I'm not sure that's that good. I might need 2 thirds to move on from Tillman. And last one. How do you approach remaining fab for the back half of the season if you're a contender? Typically, I'm aggressive in spending it. You don't get to take it with you. Good Dynasty assets rarely come across on waivers. So there's nothing to save fab for. The only exception is if you play in a league with no $0 bids. Please turn that setting on. I don't understand why you wouldn't. I prefer to be in leagues with $0 bids. But if you're playing in a league without that, then you have to save some fab for that. Otherwise, no reason to save it. Just go and be aggressive. Now, if you like the video, make sure to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. As always, the best way to support the channel is to subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops. Of course, if you want my best fantasy football advice, it's available on the Patreon. Dynasty, starts it, redraft, and more. You can sign up at patreon.com/fantasy advice. The link is in the top right corner. Every sign up helps support my independent content. But once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.